I sold my business for $30 million and decided to celebrate with my daughter and her husband at the most expensive restaurant in town. But when I stepped away to answer a phone call, the waiter whispered, "I think your daughter poured something into your glass." I returned to the table, pretending that nothing had happened, and 10 minutes later. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you were listening in the comments. The afternoon light slanted through the palms lining my driveway in Coral Gables, painting golden stripes across the windshield. I pulled the Mercedes through the gate, briefcase resting on the passenger seat beside me like a loyal companion. $30 million. The number sang in my chest, a validation of 40 years spent building something from nothing. My company, my life's work, signed away that morning, transformed into security for whatever years remained. I parked and grabbed the briefcase, its leather warm from sitting in the sun. The mansion rose before me, white stucco gleaming, purchased 5 years ago, so Rosamond and Brian could live comfortably while they found their footing. My daughter deserved everything I could give her. That's what fathers did. "Rosamond, Brian," I called from the foyer, my voice bouncing off marble floors. Silence answered first, then shuffling from upstairs. Muffled voices. I crossed to the base of the staircase, one hand on the banister, ready to climb and share my news. "Has to be tonight." Brian's voice drifted down, sharp edges cutting through the quiet. I froze, one foot on the first step. What if he notices? What if... Rosamond's reply, strained and thin. "He won't. He trusts you. That's the whole point." My hand tightened on the banister. The briefcase suddenly weighed more than it should. I retreated backward, my dress shoes whispering against marble, and moved toward the kitchen. What plan? Why tonight? The questions circled like vultures, but I pushed them down, forced my breathing to steady. I made coffee, hands going through familiar motions while my mind spun. The espresso machine hissed and gurgled. I touched my phone 3 times, fingers hovering over my lawyer's contact, but never pressed call. Not yet. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe paranoia came with sudden wealth. Everyone warned me about that. 20 minutes crawled past before footsteps descended the stairs. I arranged my face into something resembling joy and turned to greet them. Rosamond appeared first, Brian's hand resting on her lower back like a claim of ownership. My daughter wore too much makeup for a casual afternoon at home. Brian's smile gleamed, white and practiced. I closed the deal. I set my coffee cup down with deliberate care. $30 million, can you believe it? That's... Rosamond's pause stretched a beat too long. "That's wonderful, Dad." Her emphasis fell on the wrong syllable. I'd raised this woman, knew her cadences like my own heartbeat. This wasn't wonder, this was theater. "Congratulations, Hosea." Brian stepped forward, hand extended. Not Dad, though he'd called me that for 5 years. "You must be thrilled." "I thought we'd celebrate." I shook his hand, counted the seconds until he released me. "Together? As a family?" Rosamond's fingers found her wedding ring, twisting it around and around. "Of course! We're so proud of you." The words rang hollow, coins dropped in an empty well. I watched her eyes dart toward Brian, seeking permission or instruction. I couldn't tell which. "Azure Coast," I said, testing them. 8 o'clock, my treat. Brian's expression shifted, something predatory flickering behind his polished exterior. "Generous as always." The word generous carried weight I didn't understand. Resentment, anticipation. "You don't have to," Rosamond started. "He wants to, honey." Brian cut her off with surgical precision. "Let him celebrate." I studied them both, noting how they positioned themselves between me and the stairs, how their eyes met in silent conversation. The air felt wrong, like the pressure drop before a storm. "I want my daughter there, and you, Brian." I delivered the words slowly, watching for flinches. Neither flinched. 2 hours until dinner. I retreated upstairs to prepare, passing Rosamond's closed bedroom door. Voices leaked through, muffled but urgent. I pressed closer, shame burning in my chest, even as I strained to hear. "What if someone sees?" Rosamond, frightened. "No one will notice. Everyone will think he's just had too much wine." My blood turned to ice water. "I can't believe we're..." "You want to keep living here?" Brian's voice hardened. "You want the money? Then stop doubting." Silence. Then Rosamond, barely a whisper. Okay. Tonight." I stepped back from the door, my reflection catching in the hallway mirror. 63 years old, trusting face, fool's eyes. How long had I been blind? I moved to my room, locked the door, and stood in the center of expensive emptiness. My father's vintage cufflinks waited in their velvet case. I fastened them with shaking fingers, armor for a battle I hadn't yet named. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection again and made a decision. I photographed my water glass, my cologne bottle, my untouched bourbon, paranoid actions that would prove prescient. My phone felt heavier than the briefcase had. Check the will, call the lawyer tomorrow. I whispered the words aloud, making them real. When I emerged, dressed in my best suit, I found them waiting by the door. We walked to the car in silence that screamed. I drove my Mercedes, my car, my control, at least for now. Rosamond took the passenger seat. Brian settled behind me, his hand resting on the back of my headrest, fingers nearly touching my shoulder. Territorial claim. I watched them in the rearview mirror more than I watched the road. Brian's eyes met mine once, and he smiled. Not friendly, knowing. Beautiful evening, I offered, filling the toxic quiet. Perfect for celebration, Brian replied. Rosamond shifted in her seat. Dad, about your plans, for the money? My hands tightened on the wheel. Plans? Just wondering if you've thought about the future, your will, things like that. Every muscle in my body went rigid. We were still 5 minutes from the restaurant, and already she wanted to discuss my death. Funny you should mention that, I said, keeping my voice level. We pulled into Azure Coast's circular drive. The valet, Marcus, approached with his usual professional warmth. Good evening, Mr. Lane. Pleasure to see you. Good to be here, Marcus. I handed him the keys, grateful for a familiar face, someone who knew me as more than a target. Behind me, Brian leaned close to Rosamond, lips barely moving. Remember what we talked about? I turned sharply. What was that, Brian? His recovery came too smooth, too practiced. Just reminding Rosamond how lucky we are, having you. The words should have sounded grateful. Instead, they sounded like an obituary read too soon. We entered the restaurant, and I followed my daughter and son-in-law through doors that might as well have been the entrance to my tomb. But I walked through anyway, briefcase left behind, blind trust abandoned in its place, watching everything now with the clarity of a man who finally understood he was prey. The host led us through Azure Coast's main dining room, past tables where other families laughed, without knowing what secrets festered beneath their own surfaces. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Biscayne Bay, city lights beginning to glitter across dark water. Our table waited near the glass, prime position, expensive view. Of course, only the best for the man they planned to destroy tonight. I pulled out Rosamond's chair, old habit dying hard. She sat without meeting my eyes. Brian claimed the seat facing the room, positioning himself to observe everything, everyone. I took the remaining chair, back to the wall, which suited me fine. I wanted to watch too. A server materialized, young and efficient, depositing menus and reciting specials I didn't process. My attention fixed on the table's geometry. Rosamond to my left, Brian across from me, my wine glass positioned just within her reach. Wine, Brian suggested, already signaling for the sommelier. Of course. I kept my voice light, curious how far they'd take this performance. The sommelier arrived, presenting the wine list with reverent hands. Brian ordered a Bordeaux that cost $300 a bottle. My money, their taste. I nodded approval, watching Rosamond's fingers dance across the tablecloth, drawing invisible patterns. Minutes later, a different server approached, older, mid-40s, with careful eyes that marked him as someone who noticed things. His name tag read Kevin. He poured wine with practiced precision, filling each glass to the proper level. Deep burgundy liquid caught the candlelight, promising warmth and celebration. I noted where each glass sat, memorizing positions. Shall we toast? Brian raised his glass, performance continuing. To new chapters, Rosamond offered, her voice cracking slightly. To family, I countered, and watched them both freeze for half a heartbeat before recovering. We brought glasses together. Crystal sang against crystal. I lifted mine to my lips but didn't drink, setting it down as my phone vibrated in my pocket. Perfect timing, or perhaps intervention from whatever force occasionally protected fools. Excuse me. I pulled out my phone, checked the screen, my accountant's number. I should take this. Deal details. Rosamond's relief showed in her shoulders dropping an inch. Brian nodded, magnanimous. Of course. Business never stops. I stood, phone to my ear, and walked toward the terrace doors. Through the glass, I could still see our table, watch their movements. The accountant's voice droned in my ear. Confirmation numbers, transfer dates, documentation I'd review tomorrow. But my eyes stayed fixed on my daughter and the man controlling her. The terrace held only two other couples, far enough away for privacy. Cool October air washed over my face. I turned slightly, maintaining visual contact with our table through the glass doors. That's when I saw it. Rosamond leaned forward, her hand moving toward my wine glass. Brian's posture changed. He straightened, lifted his hand toward passing Kevin, calling him over about bread or water or some invented need. Distraction technique. Kevin changed course, moving toward Brian's signal, but Kevin's angle gave him sightline to the table. I watched him glance down, watched his expression shift from professional courtesy to alarm. Rosamond's hand withdrew quickly, something palmed in her fingers, so fast, so practiced. The wine glass sat innocently where she'd left it, but even from the terrace, I could see the liquid had changed. Darker, denser. My accountant asked a question. I gave some answer, autopilot response, while my world reorganized itself around confirmed betrayal. Kevin finished with Brian, stepped away, but his eyes kept returning to my glass. His movements became uncertain, professional facade cracking. I watched him war with himself, obligation to patrons, obligation to conscience. After 3 minutes that felt like hours, conscience won. I ended the call as Kevin approached the terrace doors. He pushed through, scanning for me, found me standing by the railing. Mr. Lane? His voice carried nervousness, a tremor in his practiced service industry calm. Kevin. I read his name tag again, committing it to memory. Something wrong with the service? He glanced back toward the dining room, toward our table visible through glass. Rosamond and Brian sat in apparent casual conversation, but I saw the tension in their spines, waiting for my return. Sir, Kevin's hands twisted the bar towel he carried. I don't know how to say this. I could lose my job. But I watched your daughter put something in your wine glass while you were on your call, clear liquid from a small vial. The words should have shocked me. Instead, they crystallized everything into terrible clarity. You're certain? I asked, though I'd seen it myself. Needed confirmation I wasn't losing my mind. Completely certain, sir. The glass on your left, with the wine you haven't touched yet. His eyes pleaded with me to believe him, to act. I've worked here 6 years, never seen anything like it, but I saw it clearly. I reached into my wallet, extracted a folded $100 bill, pressed it into his hand. Thank you, Kevin. You may have saved my life. His fingers closed around the money reflexively. What will you do? Nothing that will involve you, I promised. Go back to work. Forget this conversation. He nodded, relief and concern warring on his face, then disappeared back into the dining room. I remained on the terrace, cold air sharpening my thoughts, watching through glass as Rosamond checked her phone compulsively and Brian's hand rested possessively on the table, claiming space, claiming control, claiming what he thought would soon be his, my daughter, my own daughter. 36 years ago, I'd held her minutes after birth, promised her everything, delivered on every promise I could make. And tonight she'd tried to poison me. Not tried, had poisoned. The glass waited on the table, innocent crystal vessel containing death. The question wasn't whether to confront them. The question was how to make them understand exactly what they'd done, and what I would do in return. I pulled out my phone again, this time photographing the table through the glass. Angle captured all 3 glasses, documented positions. Evidence, though, for what purpose I hadn't yet decided. The phone went back in my pocket. My reflection stared back at me from the glass door. 63-year-old black man in an expensive suit. Successful businessman. Devoted father. That man died tonight. What walked back into the restaurant would be something colder, harder, capable of survival in territories he'd never imagined navigating. I pushed through the doors. Dining room noise rushed back. Conversations, laughter, clinking silver. Normal sounds of people who believed their families loved them. 20 feet separated me from our table, from my daughter, from my poisoned wine. Each step calculated, measuring, preparing. By the time I reached my chair, my face showed nothing but mild apology for the long call. I sat down, picked up my menu, smiled at them both, like a man who hadn't just watched his murder unfold. Sorry about that. I set the menu down, touched my wine glass lightly, just a brush of fingers against stem, acknowledging its presence. Deal complications, all sorted now. Rosamond's exhale carried audible relief. Brian's smile widened. Shall we order? I asked. I'm starving. And I was, not for food, for justice, for revenge, for watching them drink the poison they'd prepared for me. Sorry about that. I set my napkin across my lap with practiced ease. Business never sleeps. Brian looked up from the menu, eyes narrowing slightly. Everything all right? Better than all right. The wire transfer cleared. It's official. I lifted my wine glass, brought it close enough to smell the bouquet, then set it down without drinking. Let's order first. I want to savor this moment properly. Rosamond's fingers traced the stem of her glass, the poison one she'd prepared for me. Her smile looked like something she'd borrowed from a stranger. That's wonderful, Dad. To family, I offered, raising my glass again in mock toast, but still not drinking. They lifted theirs. Crystal rang together. I watched them both sip while mine remained untouched. Rosamond's eyes kept darting to my glass, a question building behind her forced composure. Why wasn't I drinking? I turned to the menu, making a show of consideration. The Chilean sea bass sounds perfect. Brian, what are you having? The steak, rare. His word choice felt aggressive, revealing. I'm not very hungry, Rosamond murmured. You should eat. Big evening. I emphasized the last two words, watching her flinch. She knew it was big. Just not how big. The bread basket arrived. I tore a piece, spread butter across it with slow, deliberate strokes. Time stretched. They waited for me to drink. I waited for my opportunity. Brian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at Rosamond, some silent communication passing between them. The pressure in their patience was almost visible. Excuse me, I'll be right back, I said, standing. I'll go too. Rosamond shot to her feet, almost desperate. We walked in separate directions toward the restrooms. I counted to 10, then turned back toward our table. Brian had his phone out, head down, thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. His attention completely absorbed. 3 seconds, that's all I needed. I stepped to the table, reached across, lifted Rosamond's glass from her position, set mine, the poisoned one, precisely where hers had been, placed her clean glass in my spot, used my napkin to wipe the condensation patterns, making both positions look undisturbed. Brian's head started to rise. I was already looking at the menu, wine glass nowhere near my hands. Forget something? He asked. Just checking we ordered the appetizer. All good. I moved back toward the restrooms before he could process anything unusual. When I returned, Rosamond was already seated, color high in her cheeks, anxiety radiating from her rigid posture. I slid into my chair, picked up my menu, which was now her glass, safely clean. Should we order? I asked pleasantly. We ordered. Light conversation resumed, but strained, like guitar strings tuned too tight. Rosamond kept touching her throat, taking small breaths, preparing herself for whatever came next. She reached for her wine glass. My heart stopped beating for one crystal-clear moment. Everything slowed, her fingers on the stem, the glass rising, her lips meeting the rim, the wine flowing. She drank. Not a sip. 3 large gulps, trying to calm herself. I watched with cold, absolute clarity. Brian talked about investment opportunities, his voice a drone of white noise. 2 minutes passed, 3, 4. Rosamond's expression changed. Confusion flickered across her face. She blinked rapidly, shook her head as if to clear fog. I feel... Her hand went to her throat. Strange. Honey. Brian noticed the color draining from her skin. She gripped the table edge, breathing shallow and rapid. I can't breathe right. Other diners turned, concerned murmurs rippling outward from our table. What's happening? She tried to stand, stumbled, sat back hard. Brian shouted, Someone call an ambulance. I remained perfectly still. When his panicked eyes found mine, I spoke with the coldness of someone stating basic facts. I switched the glasses, Rosamond. Silence crashed down. Her eyes locked on mine. Terror, understanding, betrayal reflected back at me like a mirror. "What did you put in my wine?" Each word came out measured, deliberate, prosecutor's tone. "What are you talking about?" Brian's face cycled through confusion, rage, disbelief. I didn't look at him, only her. "Ask your wife what she put in the glass meant for me." Rosamond sobbed, a broken sound. "It was just to help you relax, make you agreeable, for the papers." Brian's expression changed. The full weight of failure, catastrophic, complete, registered in his widening eyes. Kevin appeared, phone already at his ear, emergency services on the line. The manager materialized, trying to maintain discretion while chaos erupted at table 12. Paramedics pushed through the entrance minutes later, equipment rattling. They surrounded Rosamond, checking vitals, asking rapid questions. What did she take? Any medications? Allergies? "She ingested something from a vial she had with her," I said, voice steady. "Check her purse." They upended it. Contents scattered across white tablecloth. Lipstick, wallet, keys, and one small brown bottle. "No!" Rosamond's scream cut through the restaurant. Paramedics examined the vial, exchanged glances, began barking medical terminology. They loaded her onto a gurney, strapping her down. Brian followed in her wake, like debris caught in a current. The manager approached carefully. "Mr. Lane, I'm so sorry." "Her medical bills are her responsibility," I interrupted quietly. "Not mine." I left cash on the table for the uneaten meal and walked out into cool night air. My car sat in the lot where I'd left it hours ago, a different lifetime ago. I drove toward the hospital, following the ambulance's fading sirens. City lights blurred past. Traffic signals changed colors. Other drivers rushed to wherever they believed they needed to be. I drove carefully, obeying every law, while cold clarity settled into my bones like winter. The hospital waiting room smelled like fear wrapped in antiseptic. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing everything in pale blue. I sat in a plastic chair, hands folded, while Brian paced like a caged animal. He hadn't spoken to me since we arrived. The silence felt appropriate. Around 2 a.m, a doctor emerged, young, tired, competent looking. "Family of Rosamond Torres?" We both stood. "She's stable," the doctor said, consulting a tablet. "Diazepam intoxication, substantial quantity. We've administered flumazenil, started IV fluids. She'll recover fully, but we're keeping her under observation until tomorrow afternoon." "Can we see her?" Brian's voice cracked. "Briefly, she's sedated, likely won't remember the visit." The doctor's eyes moved to me. "The substance came from a prescription bottle. We'll need to report this." "Of course," I said calmly. "Do what's necessary." We followed him through double doors, down corridors that all looked identical. Rosamond lay in a bed surrounded by monitors, IV line running into her arm. Her face looked younger somehow, stripped of makeup and pretense. My daughter, the child I'd held minutes after birth, the woman who'd tried to drug me into signing away my life. Brian moved to her bedside, took her hand. I remained by the door, observer, not participant. After 5 minutes, I left. Found my car in the parking structure, drove home through empty streets while the city slept. The mansion felt different when I entered. Same furniture, same artwork, different meaning. I walked through rooms that now felt like enemy territory, stopped outside Rosamond's closed bedroom door. Beyond it, the bed where she'd plotted with Brian, the space where they'd rehearsed my murder. I continued to my study, closed the door, and stood at the window watching darkness slowly drain from the sky. Dawn arrived with surgical precision, orange light replacing black, sharp, and clear. Sleep seemed irrelevant. I made coffee instead, strong, bitter, hot enough to burn. Sat at my desk and began writing in my leather-bound journal. Not emotions, facts, dates, conversations, financial transactions. Building a timeline. Around 8, I heard the front door open. Brian returning, his footsteps heavy on the stairs, door closing with controlled force. His anger vibrating through walls. I went downstairs, poured a second cup of coffee, and waited. They arrived home together around 2 that afternoon. Rosamond walked slowly, hospital discharge papers clutched in her hand, wearing yesterday's clothes. Her eyes were hollowed out, skin pale. She didn't look at me. Brian supported her with a hand on her elbow. Ownership or necessity, impossible to tell. I stood in the living room archway. We need to talk. I think we're done talking, Brian shot back. Sit down. Not a request. Something in my tone made them obey. They sank onto the couch, a united front against me. I want you both out of this house, I said quietly. You have until the end of the month. Rosamond's face crumpled. Dad, please. You tried to poison me, to drug me so I'd sign something while incapacitated. What were the papers, Rosamond? Power of attorney, will modification, transfer deeds? She opened her mouth, closed it. Tears slid down her cheeks. Real ones, finally, but shed for herself, not for what she'd done. Brian leaned forward, voice hardening. We can explain? You're overreacting. She made a mistake. She's sorry. She's sorry she failed. I set my coffee cup down with precision. There's a difference. You switched the glasses on purpose. His accusation hung in the air. You poisoned your own daughter. I returned her gift, nothing more. We stared at each other, lines drawn, war declared. We're not leaving, Brian said flatly. This is our home. We have rights. No rights, no claims, nothing. I moved toward the stairs. End of February. After that, I take legal action. Behind me, Rosamond sobbed. Brian's voice rose. We'll see what lawyers have to say about elder abuse, mental incompetence. I stopped, turned back. Try it, please. Give me more evidence. His mouth snapped shut. I spent the next 3 days observing them like specimens under glass. They holed up in Rosamond's room, voices rising and falling behind closed doors. I positioned myself near vents, near doors, wherever sound traveled. Old house, thin walls, secrets that leaked. Thursday morning, I heard Brian on the phone. Competency evaluation, financial manipulation by daughter. He deliberately poisoned her. Yes, I can document erratic behavior. Building their narrative. Painting me as the villain, themselves as concerned family, protecting an elderly man from himself. I documented everything. Wrote down fragments of conversations. Noted timestamps. Photographed financial records I'd obtained. Bank statements showing money transferred from my accounts to theirs. Purchases made on credit cards I'd given them. The paper trail of dependency. Patterns emerged. 15 months ago, a transfer of $50,000. Emergency house repairs that never happened. 8 months ago, a $70,000 withdrawal. Investment opportunity with no documentation. 3 months ago, Brian suddenly possessed a new car, title in his name, paid in cash. My money, their lifestyle, my trust, their exploitation. On February 20th, I sat in my study and called Ryan Blackwood's law office. The attorney my banker had recommended for complex family matters. The receptionist's voice came through efficient, professional. I need a consultation regarding potential fraud, elder financial exploitation, and attempted, I paused, considering words, harm by family members. Keys clicked on her end. Can you come in Thursday? What time? 2 p.m. available? I'll be there. I set down the phone. Through the window, I could see Rosamond and Brian on the back patio, heads together in urgent conversation, planning their next move. So was I. I opened my laptop and started a new document. Timeline of financial manipulation, evidence log. The first entry began with a date from 15 months ago. The cursor blinked on the empty document, waiting. I typed the header, timeline of financial manipulation, evidence log. Below it, I began listing everything I could remember, working backward through 18 months of trust, slowly eroding into exploitation. March 2024, $50,000 transfer for emergency house repairs. I pulled up my bank records, found the transaction, cross-referenced with my calendar. No contractors had visited that month, no permits filed. The house remained exactly as it had been. First lie, first theft. May 2024, attorney consultation they had arranged. I searched my email, found the confirmation. They'd told me it was about estate planning, making things easier for everyone. Now I understood what they'd really wanted. Access, control, signatures on documents I'd never agreed to. The list grew, each entry a small wound that had seemed insignificant at the time. Together, they formed a pattern that looked like premeditated theft. I worked until midnight, then reviewed everything at dawn on February 21st, printed 3 copies. organized them in labeled folders, dressed in my best suit, projecting competence, not victimhood. The drive to downtown Miami took 40 minutes. Brickell's financial district rose in glass towers that caught morning sun and threw it back like mirrors. I parked underground, took the elevator to the 24th floor, carried my folder like evidence, which it was. Ryan Blackwood's office occupied a corner with views of Biscayne Bay. The receptionist, professional, efficient, led me to a conference room where the city spread below like a map of territory to be defended. Ryan entered precisely at 2. Early 40s, sharp suit, eyes that assessed without judgment. We shook hands. I liked that he didn't waste time with unnecessary pleasantries. I opened the folder, slid documents across polished wood. Everything I can document: timeline, medical records from the hospital, witness information. He read without interrupting, asked pointed questions, took notes with a fountain pen that made deliberate scratches across legal pad. Florida Statute 825, he finally said, exploitation of an elderly person. It covers attempts to gain control of assets through coercion, manipulation, or incapacitation. He tapped my timeline. This shows clear pattern. The restaurant incident, attempted drugging, that's criminal. But we need more documentation of ongoing behavior. What kind of documentation? Their current actions, conversations where they discuss strategy, attempts at manipulation. You mentioned they're still living in your home? At my nod, he continued. I'm going to recommend a private investigator. Serafina Chen, former police detective, specializes in elder fraud cases. She can set up surveillance, document everything legally. He wrote a name and number on his card, slid it across. Call her. Get evidence of what they're doing now, not just what happened before. Then we discuss protective trusts, restraining orders, potential civil suit. I left feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Validation. This wasn't paranoia. This was legitimate protection. 4 days of careful observation followed. I noted everything. Their whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. The way they watched me like predators tracking wounded prey. How Brian's hand constantly rested on Rosamond's shoulder. Control disguised as affection. Monday morning, February 25th, I drove to Wynwood. Serafina Chen's office occupied a modest building, with professional certificates on walls and no wasted space. She was late 30s, sharp eyes, direct manner. Ryan sent your file, she said after I'd explained. Restaurant poisoning, financial exploitation, ongoing cohabitation with hostile parties. You want surveillance? Whatever documents their behavior, legally. Cameras in common areas of your own home, legal. Living room, kitchen, hallways. Audio and video, cloud backup, you access from your phone. She quoted prices, $5,000 retainer plus hourly rates. I signed the contract without hesitation. Money meant nothing compared to truth. I'll need access Tuesday, she said. Can you get them out for a few hours? I'll arrange it. Tuesday morning at breakfast, I mentioned casually, I need items from that specialty market in Coral Gables. Would you mind picking them up? Maybe have lunch while you're out. I provided a specific list, items from a store 30 minutes away. They left at 10. I texted Serafina. She arrived 15 minutes later with equipment cases. The cameras went into a bookshelf in the living room, a kitchen clock above the table, a smoke detector in the hallway. Small, invisible, recording everything. 90 minutes later, installation complete. Act completely normal, she instructed. Don't let them know you're watching. The best evidence comes when they think they're safe. That evening, I sat in my study with headphones on, watching footage from the day. Their return from the errand, kitchen conversation while unpacking groceries. He's being too quiet, Rosamond said, voice tight with worry. It's suspicious. We need a different approach. Brian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Direct didn't work. Time for indirect. I saved the file, time-stamped and labeled. Evidence log, entry 1. The days that followed built my archive. February 28th. Brian discussing backup plans. March 1st. Rosamond worrying I was acting strange. March the 2nd. Them researching attorneys about challenging mental competency. March 3rd. Brian's search history showing declaring parent incompetent. Each conversation documented, saved, organized into folders by theme. I watched them plot my destruction with the methodical patience of someone building a legal case brick by brick. Serafina sent weekly reports, their social media activity, online purchases, public record searches, the digital trail of people preparing for war. On March 4th, I decided to feed them exactly what they wanted. At breakfast, I rubbed my temples. I've been feeling so tired lately. Their heads snapped up like hounds catching scent. At dinner that evening, I made a show of forgetting where I'd put my reading glasses. I've been so forgetful. Rosamond leaned forward, concern dripping false. Maybe you should see a doctor, Dad? At your age, it's normal, Brian added smoothly. But definitely worth checking. I nodded, playing confused old man. Later, reviewing the footage, I watched them celebrate my admission like it was a gift. March 18th evening, 3 weeks of evidence, dozens of conversations, hundreds of hours of footage. I opened my phone, found Ryan Blackwood's number. Tomorrow, we'd strategize. Time to move from documentation to action. The articles appeared on March 5th. I found them spread across the kitchen counter that morning. Printed pages about cognitive decline, early dementia symptoms, the importance of medical evaluation for seniors. Rosamond stood by the coffee maker, watching my reaction. I found these online, thought they might be helpful for understanding what you've been experiencing. I picked up the first article, skimmed it with appropriate confusion. I suppose it couldn't hurt to read. Knowledge is power, Brian added from the doorway. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I carried the articles to my study, photographed every page, filed them as evidence. Psychological manipulation, documented. They were building a narrative, the confused elder who needed intervention, who couldn't be trusted with his own affairs. Over the next 3 days, more articles appeared. Memory care facilities, power of attorney importance, financial management for those experiencing cognitive challenges. Each one carefully left where I'd find it, each one photographed and archived. March 8th, surveillance captured them in the living room, believing they were alone. We need an expert opinion, Brian said. Someone who can evaluate him professionally. A psychologist? Rosamond's voice held hope and guilt in equal measure. I know someone, Marcus Reynolds, clinical psychologist, specializes in elder cognition. We set up a casual lunch. I introduce them. Marcus makes observations. Will he do that, ethically? He'll be objective. If your father shows signs, Marcus documents them. If not, Brian shrugged. Then we know for certain. I watched this conversation 3 times, making notes. They were escalating, bringing in outside validation for their narrative. March 10th, I met Brian for lunch at a cafe in Coconut Grove. He'd suggested it that morning. Just the two of us, get to know each other better without work stress. And I'd agreed with appropriate gratitude. Marcus Reynolds joined us 15 minutes in. Hosea, this is my friend Marcus. I mentioned him. The psychologist? We shook hands. Marcus, mid-40s, professional demeanor, cautious eyes. Brian's told me about you. Successful business sale. Congratulations. We talked for an hour. I performed perfectly, occasionally searching for words, asking Marcus to repeat questions, mentioning my forgetfulness. Not overdone, just subtle confusion. Marcus maintained professional distance, but I caught him observing, assessing, cataloging. It was good meeting you, Marcus said at lunch's end, handing me his card. If you ever want to talk professionally, I'm available. I pocketed the card. Evidence, not service. That evening's surveillance showed Brian calling Marcus from the living room, speakerphone on. Your impression? Brian asked eagerly. He's 63. Some age-appropriate memory variation isn't unusual. Marcus's voice carried careful neutrality. I can't make clinical assessments from casual lunch conversation. But if there were concerns, you could evaluate him formally. Long pause. With his consent, yes. But, Brian, I'm not comfortable being part of whatever this is. If you have legitimate concerns about his welfare, there are proper channels. Of course, just exploring options. After he hung up, Brian's expression darkened. We'll find someone else. I saved that footage with particular satisfaction. Even when they tried to corrupt professionals, ethics intervened. March 12th through 17th, I continued my performance. Small mistakes, confusion, repeated questions. At breakfast on the 15th, I asked Rosamond about plans we'd discussed the previous evening, pretending I'd forgotten. Her eyes lit up with excitement, barely concealed. The surveillance captured everything. Their discussions of my decline, Brian researching commitment procedures, Rosamond worrying it was moving too slowly. March 18th, I adjusted strategy. At dinner, I mentioned casually, "I've been thinking about updating my will." Ryan suggested it, given the business sale. "Want to make sure everything's in order." Silence crashed down. Then Rosamond, trying for casual, "That's responsible, Dad. When are you meeting with him?" "Soon. He's drafting documents, making sure you're taken care of." I let the words hang there, bait in a trap. After dinner, I retreated to my study. The surveillance showed them in the kitchen, voices pitched low, but the microphone caught everything. "He mentioned the will," Rosamond said, barely containing hope. "Doesn't mean he's changing it in our favor." Brian's voice carried warning. "Could be the opposite. But if he's really confused, if we document that he's not competent when he makes changes, then we challenge them later. Either way, we need more evidence of his decline. Real evidence, not just our observations." They talked for 40 minutes, planning how to document my supposed incompetence. Video, everything. Record strange behaviors. Build a case for incapacity that would invalidate any legal changes against their interests. I watched them celebrate their cleverness, pouring wine, toasting to progress. They thought they were winning. I closed the laptop, opened my phone, scrolled to Ryan Blackwood's number. 3 weeks of footage. Conversations, schemes, manipulation attempts, psychological warfare, all captured in perfect digital clarity. Tomorrow we'd discuss how weeks of evidence could become legal strategy, how surveillance could become leverage, how their own words could destroy them. I had documented their plot with the same methodical patience they'd used planning mine, except I'd been better at it, more thorough, more strategic. Time to move to the next phase. Time to show them what happened when you underestimated a man who'd built an empire from nothing, who understood that real power came from preparation, documentation, and knowing exactly when to strike. I sent Ryan a text. "Have extensive new evidence. Need meeting ASAP." His response came within minutes. "Friday 10th a.m., bring everything." I set down the phone. Through the study window, moonlight painted the lawn silver. In the house around me, they slept soundly, believing they were architects of my downfall. They had no idea they'd been building their own. Morning light cut through the study windows. March 19th. I picked up my phone at 8 sharp, dialed Ryan Blackwood's direct line. He answered on the second ring. "Hosea, your text said you had evidence." "Weeks of it. Surveillance footage, conversations, manipulation attempts, everything documented. I need to meet today." "This afternoon, 2 o'clock. Bring everything." I spent the morning organizing, created a folder on my laptop labeled Legal Evidence Package, copied surveillance files organized by date and severity, printed transcripts of their most damning conversations, Brian discussing competency challenges, Rosamond worrying about my suspicious quiet, both celebrating their supposed progress toward controlling my assets. Serafina's weekly reports went into a manila envelope, highlighted and tabbed. I loaded everything onto 2 USB drives, one for Ryan, one backup. At 2, I sat across from Ryan in his conference room, USB drive, and documents between us like evidence at trial. He watched 3 hours of footage, read every transcript, studied Serafina's behavioral analysis. Finally, he sat back, fingers steepled. "This is extensive. Multiple legal options, restraining orders, civil suit, criminal charges for the poisoning attempt." He tapped the trust document I'd mentioned wanting. "But first, we protect your assets. Irrevocable living trust." "How does that work?" "You transfer assets to the trust. It becomes a separate legal entity. Independent trustee manages it. You set conditions for beneficiary access. Once signed, it's untouchable. Even you can't change it." He pulled out a legal pad, began sketching structure. "We make it ironclad. They can't sue their way in, can't manipulate trustees, can't challenge it effectively." "How fast?" 1 week if we move now. You'll transfer most of your assets, keep enough liquid for personal use. We'll set strict conditions for Rosamond's eventual access." "What conditions?" Ryan smiled, sharp and professional. "Whatever you want. Age requirements, financial independence. no pending legal cases, whatever ensures she can't access money through coercion or fraud. Over the next 5 days, we built an impenetrable fortress around my wealth. March 20th, trust structure designed. 25 million transferred to the trust. 5 million kept liquid for my use. Rosamond could access at age 45, 9 years away, if she demonstrated 5 years of financial independence and had no civil or criminal financial cases against her. March 23rd, meeting with Florida Fiduciary Services. 2 trust officers, professional, impartial, explained their role. They'd follow the document exactly. No family pressure, no manipulation, no exceptions. March 24th, final signing. Ryan's conference room again, but this time with a notary and trust officers present. Documents spread across the table like a treaty ending a war. I signed every page, initialed, dated. The notary stamped each signature with official finality. "Your assets are protected," Ryan said, as I gathered copies into a leather portfolio. "She can't manipulate, coerce, or sue her way to them. The trust is irrevocable. Done." I drove home, feeling something I hadn't felt since February: power, control, safety. At home, life continued its strange theater. They didn't know about the trust yet. Surveillance captured their casual discussions about inheritance, their certainty that eventually my money would be theirs. March 28th, breakfast. Rosamond buttered toast, mentioned when we inherit like it was foregone conclusion. That evening, Brian's laptop search history, how to challenge a will in Florida. I decided to tell them April 1st, fitting date for schemes to crumble. March 31st, I texted them both. Family meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m., living room, important. Ryan had advised doing it in public or with witnesses. They may get aggressive. My house, I'd replied. My rules. The cameras will capture everything. April 1st arrived clear and bright. I positioned my laptop connected to the television, surveillance footage queued and ready. At 10, they entered the living room, nervous energy crackling around them. I stood. They sat. Couch lower than my standing position, hierarchy established. I've made decisions about my estate. I held up the trust document. I've created an irrevocable living trust. Their attention sharpened. I explained systematically. 25 million transferred, independent trustee, access conditions, age 45, financial independence, no legal cases. Watch their faces cycle through understanding. "What?" Rosamond's voice broke. "You're cutting me out? I'm protecting my assets from manipulation." Brian erupted from the couch. "This is because of the restaurant? One mistake, and you—" "One mistake?" I picked up the remote, pressed play. Their own voices filled the room. Surveillance footage. Them discussing competency challenges. Them planning to document my decline. Them celebrating their progress. "You spied on us?" Rosamond crying now. "Your own daughter?" I protected myself from people who tried to drug me into signing legal documents. "We'll sue." Brian stepped forward, aggression poorly masked. "We'll challenge this. You can't. It's irrevocable, already done, legally bulletproof." I met his eyes without flinching. "Try challenging it. Waste your money on attorneys. The law is clear. We've lived here 5 years. We have rights. You have no rights to my money. You never did." Brian stormed out. Rosamond followed, sobbing. I returned to my study, pulled up the camera footage of the confrontation just recorded, saved it with timestamp and label, evidence of their response, rage confirming guilt. The next week, the house became battlefield. Slammed doors, hostile silence. Overheard phone calls to attorneys who all said the same thing. The trust was solid, unbreakable. April 7th, Rosamond tried reconciliation, knocked on my study door, tears ready. "Dad, we can work this out. I'm your daughter." "My daughter wouldn't have tried to poison me. It was a mistake. Please, leave my study." She left. I sat alone, staring at the wall, knowing what came next. The trust protected my money. Now I needed to reclaim my home. I opened my notebook, wrote 4 words. Remove them from house. That evening, I called a real estate agent. Catherine Wells, recommended by my banker for discretion and speed. "I want to sell my house. How quickly can we list?" I can see it tomorrow morning. If it's as you describe, we could list by this weekend. She arrived April 8th with measuring tape and professional assessment, walked through rooms where my daughter and son-in-law still lived, evaluating market value of their borrowed home. Beautiful property. I can list it at $7 million. This market, it'll move fast, but it needs to be vacant for showings. It will be. The listing went live April 10th. First showings scheduled for April 12th. I informed Rosamond and Brian by text. Showings Friday. You'll need to leave for 3 hours. Brian texted back. You're selling the house? Yes. No response. They left Friday morning, returned to find business cards on the kitchen counter from interested buyers. Their faces, realization dawning that I was dismantling their entire life. April 15th. I had Ryan draft the eviction notice. Formal, legal, final, 60 days to vacate. Delivered to them that evening as they sat in the living room, their borrowed living room. Brian read it, face darkening, tore it in half. You can't evict us. This is our home. Read the notice. Your guests at will. No lease, no rent, no tenancy rights. 60 days, June 15th. We'll fight this. Try. They hired an attorney. April 16th. I listened to their phone consultation through surveillance. The attorney's assessment matched Ryan's. If there's no lease or rental agreement, he has grounds. You're living there by permission, which he's now revoking. Ryan filed the eviction action April 20th. Court date set for May 10th, 3 weeks away. Meanwhile, I leased a condo downtown, month to month, waterfront, quiet. Somewhere clean, untainted by betrayal. Moved in April 28th. The house became hostile territory. I stayed at the condo mostly, returning only for necessities. Each visit, surveillance captured their desperation. Rosamond crying, Brian raging, both calling attorneys who had no solutions. May 10th arrived, Miami-Dade Courthouse, 3rd floor, eviction proceedings. Ryan and I sat at plaintiff table. Across the aisle, Rosamond, Brian, and their attorney, young, overmatched, knowing he had no case. Judge Martinez took the bench. 50s no-nonsense expression, experienced in seeing people try to avoid consequences. Their attorney stood. Your Honor, my clients have lived in this property for 5 years. Under what agreement? Judge Martinez interrupted. Their family. The petitioner is Ms. Torres's father. That's not a lease. Do they pay rent? No, but do they have a written tenancy agreement? No, Your Honor, however. Then they're guests at will. Mr. Lane has provided proper 60-day notice. She looked at Ryan. Yes, Your Honor, served April 15th. They have until June 15th to vacate. Judge Martinez reviewed documents. I see no legal impediment to this eviction. Petitioner owns the property. Respondents have no lease or rental agreement. Notice was proper. She looked at Rosamond and Brian. You have until June 15th. After that, sheriff enforcement is available. Motion granted. The gavel cracked. Final. In the hallway, Brian confronted me, voice low and vicious. You'll regret this. You're destroying your own family. I'm removing people who poisoned me. We'll make you pay. With what money? I walked away, leaving him sputtering in the corridor. The next 5 weeks passed in cold standoff. I stayed at the condo. They remained at the house, packing slowly, desperately seeking rental properties they couldn't afford without my support. Surveillance showed endless arguments, Rosamond breaking down, Brian's rage at their complete defeat. June 14th, I received confirmation. The house buyer had completed inspection, approved for closing in August, pending vacant possession. June 15th, moving day. I drove to the house at noon, large truck in the driveway, furniture being loaded. Rosamond directing movers with red eyes and exhausted face. Brian carrying boxes, movements sharp with suppressed fury. They didn't acknowledge me. I stood on the lawn, watching them load their belongings. Everything I'd bought them, everything they'd accumulated during 5 years of living on my generosity. The truck pulled away at 4. They drove off in Brian's car without looking back. I entered the empty house, footsteps echoing on hardwood. No furniture, no them, no poison in the air. Room by room, I walked through reclaimed space. Marks on walls where pictures had hung, carpet indentations where furniture had sat. The house felt like shell, contaminated by what had happened within it, but finally, blissfully, empty. My phone buzzed. Ryan? Eviction complete? Ready to discuss civil suit? I stood in the center of the living room, my living room, looking around at vacancy. Selling the house would erase their presence entirely. But first, one more legal action, one more permanent strike. I type back, yes, schedule meeting for Monday, time to make this permanent. I type my response to Ryan, yes, schedule meeting for Monday, time to make this permanent. The empty living room surrounded me, no furniture, just hardwood floors and echoes. I sat down, back against the wall, laptop balanced on my knees, pulled up the evidence folders one last time, months of documentation, surveillance footage organized by date, medical records from the hospital, Kevin's statement, Serafina's reports. Every conversation, every manipulation attempt, every piece of proof that what happened to me wasn't paranoia, but calculated exploitation. I created a final timeline document, printed everything, organized it in an expandable folder with labeled tabs. Each piece told part of the story. Together, they were undeniable. Monday morning, June 16th, I met Ryan at his office, spread the evidence across his conference table like laying out pieces of a prosecution. Civil suit under Florida Statute 825-103, Ryan said, making notes. Exploitation of elderly persons. Financial manipulation, attempted drugging, coercion. We'll add emotional distress, fraud, conspiracy. Requesting $500,000 in damages plus costs. This isn't about money, I said. I know. It's about public record. Documentation of what they did. He looked up from his notes. You want consequences? Exactly. We filed June 17th. Rosamond and Brian were served papers at their new apartment. Cramped two-bedroom in a neighborhood far from Coral Gables luxury. The process server reported they'd barely unpacked. Their attorney contacted Ryan within days, voice stressed on the speakerphone. My clients can't afford this. They're already financially devastated. They should have considered that before attempting to drug and defraud their benefactor, Ryan replied coolly. Discovery began. Ryan requested their financial records. Bank statements showed the truth. No savings, living on maxed credit cards, drowning in debt created by their lifestyle expectations. June 28th, settlement offer arrived. I met Ryan at his office to review. $50,000 payment plan, private admission of wrongdoing, no trial. It's reasonable, Ryan said carefully. They clearly can't pay full judgment, but the settlement would be confidential, no public record. I slid the papers back across his desk. No, I want this public. I want it in court records forever. Trial is risky. Judge could award less. I don't care about the money. I care about the record. I met his eyes. They tried to destroy me. I want it documented officially that they were wrong and I was right. Ryan nodded slowly. Then we go to trial. July became preparation month. Kevin confirmed he'd testify. The hospital doctor provided expert affidavit. Serafina prepared surveillance evidence for court presentation. I gave my deposition. Hours of questions answered under oath, building the factual foundation. July 25th, pre-trial conference. Judge set trial for July 28th. That Monday morning arrived clear and hot. I dressed in my best suit, arrived at Miami-Dade County Courthouse early. Judge Catherine Morrison presided, mid-50s, reputation for fairness and no-nonsense rulings. Ryan had recommended bench trial over jury. Judges understand elder law better than random citizens, he'd explained. Opening statements. Ryan presented timeline and evidence overview with methodical precision. Their attorney, young, overmatched, argued, family misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Kevin testified first. Described the restaurant incident with clear conviction. I saw Ms. Torres pour something from a small vial into Mr. Lane's wine glass while he was away from the table. Clear liquid, deliberate action. Their attorney tried cross-examination. Could you have been mistaken? No, I know what I saw. I couldn't stay silent about it. Hospital doctor explained diazepam findings, dosage levels, danger posed. Serafina presented surveillance methodology, chain of custody, authentication of footage. Day 2, July 29th. The surveillance footage played on courtroom screen. Their own voices filled the space. Discussing competency challenges. Planning Marcus consultation. Celebrating their supposed progress toward when we inherit. Brian's words. He's 63, not sharp anymore. Rosamond's voice. We deserve this money. I watched Judge Morrison take notes, expression stern and focused. Rosamond testified, crying, admitted the restaurant incident, but claimed she just wanted him to listen about important documents. Brian testified defensive and hostile. Blamed me for overreacting to family conflict. Then my turn. Witness stand felt elevated, formal, everyone watching. I stated my name, age, relationship to defendants. Answered Ryan's questions with calm precision. Restaurant, surveillance, trust creation, eviction. Presented evidence piece by piece. Cross-examination came aggressive. Aren't you being vindictive, mister? Lane? I'm seeking accountability. There's a difference. Judge Morrison asked her own question. Why pursue civil suit after trust protection and eviction? I looked directly at her. Because what they did was wrong. It needs to be on public record. For my protection, for precedent, for truth. July 30th, closing arguments. Ryan, this is textbook elder exploitation, attempted drugging, financial manipulation, psychological coercion. The evidence is overwhelming. Their attorney, family conflict and poor judgment, yes, but not criminal exploitation. Judge Morrison closed her notebook. I'll issue written ruling within 2 weeks. I left the courthouse in afternoon heat, knowing I'd done what I came to do, told the truth publicly, presented the evidence. Now justice would decide if truth mattered. 2 weeks to wait. 2 weeks to wonder if the system would validate what I'd endured or dismiss it as family drama. I drove back to my temporary condo, watched the sun set over Biscayne Bay, and waited for the world to confirm what I already knew, that I'd been right to protect myself, right to fight back, right to demand accountability. August 15th. Morning light broke across the ocean outside my balcony. Coffee steamed in my hand, bitter, familiar, anchoring. 2 weeks since trial ended. The phone rang at 9 sharp. Hosea, Ryan, we have the verdict. I sat down, ocean view stretching endless before me. And judge ruled in your favor, complete victory. She found clear and convincing evidence of elder exploitation, attempted financial fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Judgment for $350,000 plus legal costs. $75,000 in punitive damages. $425,000 total. The number felt abstract. There's more, Ryan continued. Permanent restraining order. They're prohibited from contacting you directly or indirectly. No calls, letters, third-party communication. Violation means contempt charges. And the payment? They have nothing. Court-ordered payment plan. Garnishment of future wages until satisfied. Could take years. But the judgment is public record, searchable. Permanent documentation of what they attempted. That's what I'd wanted, not money. Documentation, validation, public record that I wasn't paranoid or cruel, that I'd been targeted and had every right to protect myself. Thank you, Ryan, for everything. You did the work. I just made it legal. After we hung up, I sat watching sunrise become morning. The written opinion arrived by email an hour later. I read every page, Judge Morrison's words. The evidence presented demonstrates calculated exploitation of an elderly individual by those in positions of trust. The restaurant incident alone, attempted drugging to facilitate document signing, constitutes criminal behavior. The subsequent surveillance footage reveals ongoing manipulation and planning. This court finds defendants' actions reprehensible and deserving of maximum civil penalties. Reprehensible, maximum penalties. Public record. I printed the opinion, filed it away. One more document in a case now closed. August 16th, I closed on the Coral Gables house. Sold to a young family for $2.75 million. They'd never know what had happened within those walls. They'd fill it with different memories, different lives, different futures. Same day, I purchased a downtown condo. 10th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, ocean view stretching to horizon. $850,000, cash purchase from the house sale. Modern, clean, untainted by history. I moved in August 18th. Furniture delivered, arranged simply, nothing excessive, nothing I didn't need. The space felt like breathing after being underwater. August 20th, final meeting with Serafina, her office in Wynwood, certificates still on the wall. Case closed, she said, handing me a thumb drive. All surveillance footage, reports, documentation. For your records? Thank you for everything. You made it easy. They were predictable. She stood, extended her hand. Take care of yourself, Hosea. We shook. Business concluded. Professional relationship ended. August 22nd, I sat on my new balcony, phone in hand. Scrolled to Rosamond's contact. Finger hovered over the screen. Delete contact. Confirmation dialog appeared. I pressed yes. Her name disappeared. Brian's next. Both gone from my phone, my life, my future. The restraining order meant they couldn't reach out. Even if they wanted to apologize, reconcile, explain, the law prevented it. 3 years minimum. Long enough for life to move forward without them. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sadness. Just quiet peace. August 23rd and 24th, I established new routines. Morning coffee on the balcony. Afternoon walks along the waterfront. Evening reading with ocean sounds drifting through open windows. Called old friends I'd neglected during the chaos. Made plans for lunch, reconnections, rebuilding social life beyond surveillance and legal battles. August 25th, sunset painted the sky in layers. Orange bleeding into purple, bleeding into deep blue. I stood on my balcony, coffee cooling in my hand, watching day become night. 6 months since February. Since that restaurant. Since Kevin's warning and the glass switch and everything that followed. I'd protected my assets through the trust, removed them from my home through eviction, held them accountable through civil judgment, created permanent public record of their exploitation. I'd won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival, like emerging from dark water into air and realizing you're still breathing. My daughter had tried to poison me. That truth sat heavy, unchangeable, but I'd refused to be victim, refused to accept manipulation, refused to let trust make me vulnerable to destruction. The ocean stretched endless, horizon line sharp and clean. Somewhere in the city behind me, Rosamond and Brian lived with consequences. Judgment debt following them for years. Public record haunting job applications and background checks. Restraining order preventing them from spinning narratives or seeking reconciliation on their terms. I didn't hate them. Hatred required energy, attention, emotional investment. I'd spent all that during documentation, preparation, legal battles. Now I had only peace. The sun touched the horizon, colors deepened, city lights began twinkling behind me. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't move to refill it, just stood there, watching nature's cycle continue regardless of human drama. I'd built an empire from nothing, sold it for $30 million, protected $25 million through ironclad trust, lost a daughter, but saved myself, found justice in courtrooms and peace in separation. Some stories ended with family reunions, forgiveness, healing. This one ended with distance, documentation, and the relief of safety. The sun slipped below the ocean. Darkness gathered. I finished my cold coffee, set the cup down on the balcony railing, and stood watching stars appear. Tomorrow I'd call my old business partner about that consulting opportunity. Next week I'd have lunch with friends. Eventually I'd date, travel, fill days with purpose beyond legal warfare. But tonight, I just stood here, free, protected, alone but not lonely. The ocean whispered against the shore far below. The city hummed its endless rhythm. Life continued, indifferent to individual struggles, offering new days to those who survived old battles. I'd survived. That was enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.